Welcome to the CJ Murray Podcast, an exploration of music and growth on an intellectual, philosophical, and emotional basis. Today's guest is Coda Owens, an actor who has been in over 20 productions in the past 5 years, as well as a really talented vocalist. We will discuss the topics of beauty, being authentic in the arts, and ultimately doing your best, no matter what. I hope you find his passion as contagious as I did. Thank you guys for listening, and now enjoy this conversation with Coda Owens. When I met you, you dreamed really big. Yeah. Even if it was a little crazy for a high schooler, it was backed by a certain level of belief and passion that I felt like I could get on board with you.
Yeah. And really that's been my goal all along, is that even if I'm not the most talented, or even if I'm not the one who can make things work or the richest person, like having the passion behind it will get you somewhere, even if it's not exactly where you want to be, you know?
I love that.
But,
okay, so I'm just going to jump right to the only question I really had for you.
Yeah, for sure.
Tell me your most controversial music philosophy thought.
I think that typically when people think of music, they think of entertainment, right? That music is something that entertains people. You know, you think of all like the pop culture concerts, or, you know, even like recitals that you go to get entertained. You know, even in my world with theater, you know, musicals, they're a form of entertainment. In fact, they kind of started out as that because musicals really came from operas, and operas started out in the Italian Renaissance, which everything was all about big, grand, however we can make it look. That's what's important. It was all about the entertainment. But if you go back even further with that, music was more music and literature in and of itself. And I think the two kind of combine hand in hand because they're both not entertainment necessarily, but they're an art form. And I think that's the biggest controversy for me anyway, is that people think of music, art, or music or literature or plays or theater, they think of it as a form of entertainment, right? You go to watch a movie, you sit back, you relax, get some popcorn, pay attention, don't pay attention, doesn't matter. You can watch it later. It's all about the entertainment. But the music it shouldn't be seen as entertainment. You know, it should really be seen as an art form where you're communicating a message. And going back on the literature side of it, Aristotle wrote this thing called the Poetics, where he said, poetry meaning all of literature, and he basically said what makes good literature. And he went through a whole list of things, but his kind of crux, or his thesis, was that art is beautiful for the sake of being beautiful. And then he went on to identify what makes art beautiful, and he came to the conclusion that it's to withdraw an emotion from someone. It's like a release for the audience, this catharsis, you know, this way of feeling fear and pity for the characters on stage and having that release for yourself. And I think that really is what makes art beautiful. You know, that's what makes you want to watch a movie the second time to get more out of it, or that's what makes you cry during a symphony. Even if it has no words. That's what makes you relate to a character like Hamlet, or, you know, with his struggle with relationships, revenge, and suicide. That's what makes you relate to characters on stage, is that catharsis, that feeling that you want to share with them, but you're outside of them still, you know? Yeah. So
one thing on that, I mean, there's a lot.
Yeah, sorry, that was a lot.
Anybody could go off of. Oh no, absolutely. Art and music, ideally, it takes something of you to a whole nother level you didn't even know was there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, like a classic sacrificial story. You know, the story gets you to care about the main character. And then when they make the big sacrifice, there's a part of you that would hope that you would do the same thing. Or there's a part of you that's cheering for the person they're sacrificing for. Right. Saying, man, I just really wish they're going to make it out alive. How's that going to happen?
Yeah, and I think invested,
Exactly. And I think that's in another frame of what you're saying is with music. The idea is that you get invested. You know, there's something about beauty that draws you in.
Right.
And here's the thought. It doesn't just draw you in. It draws you in a way that honors what's there.
Absolutely.
It doesn't manipulate you too much, or it provides an interesting contrast that shows you something about yourself that's also true.
Yeah.
I'm being really vague. Let me say it again. You see yourself in the song.
Absolutely.
You know, you hear a love song. I think what makes a beautiful love song is if it tells a story where you relate and you're like, man, I feel that way about my girl.
Yeah, you start thinking about who you love. Yeah.
Exactly. And there's something awesome about being a musician.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that you can make something beautiful that will find its way into relating to a piece of someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even going beyond that, it's like, what part of me have I yet to discover that the art will teach? You know? And I think I see that a lot more in acting, and even in, singing arias and things like that. A lot of people, I think, consider acting to be putting on like a mask, right? It's like, oh, well, now here's my happy mask, here's my sad mask, and that's the acting of it all. And with music, I think it can be said the same thing. You have your technique, you have your show that you put on, right? Yeah. But I think that it's less about putting on a show and more about stripping away what you've put, like the barriers that you've put in front of other people. Like when an actor gets up and he performs, since we talked about Hamlet, an actor gets up, performs Hamlet, he's not putting on the persona of Hamlet necessarily. Rather, he's stripping away down at the basis of what Hamlet is. He's a man who's deeply hurt. He's looking for revenge, and he will stop at nothing to get it. To the point where he's considering killing himself. And so it's like we in our lives have felt those feelings before, maybe not as extreme, but it's not on us to put those feelings on, rather to strip away until the feeling is there. And then sure, we can add some idiosyncrasies, go by the name Hamlet, go up on a stage, call it a day. And I think that with music, it's the same way. We were actually I just came from a recital, and not to sound pretentious.
You're good. No, you're good.
But I just came from a recital, fantastic recital. And in it, they sang part of Mozart's Requiem.
Yeah.
And a Requiem back in the day, it wasn't just something to be like, hey, listen to this cool piece of music I wrote. It was meant as like a funeral song that was played at people's funerals.
Yeah. And
so this song, I don't quite remember which portion of it was. It was the Day of Wrath, whichever one that is. And it was this very like harsh and very, minor. I think it's in B minor. It's absolutely gorgeous and stunning. And Mozart didn't write it to make people impressed. He wrote it because it was what he was feeling. How much tragedy is in an artist's life for him to create something beautiful. And then we sit there and go, oh yeah, entertain me with that. It's like, no. This was the essence of who this man was. Like, this is what made this artist who they are. These are the battles that they faced, the tragedies that they went through. And so then you take it and put it on yourself, and if you're performing it, okay, what battles have I been through? What things have I faced where I would want to sing about this day of wrath, Or, what fears do I have that encourage me to feel the peace and to sing it? Yeah. And, there's a difference between and I know you as a musician know this, there's a difference between just playing chords and then like feeling the chords as you play them. It's true. There's a huge difference between, just the technique of it all, which technique is great, don't get me wrong. Yeah. But I mean, AI can create technique, there's that human emotion element. And that's really what music and art and poetry and literature and all these things combined. Yeah. That's what they are. They're an expression of the human race, of the human existence. And it's something that people can't just copy or repeat or seek for entertainment, It's a release. It's an emotional thing.
This is throwback. I wrote a blog post maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Called The Pursuit of the Beauty of Music. And one of the points I think I made to tie to what you're saying is part of the beauty of music, the pursuit of the beauty of music, or even acting for that matter, is the work you have to put into it.
Oh yeah.
To show that, because I think if someone isn't skilled, it is putting it to a degree is putting on. And the reason you practice is so that you're no longer putting effort into putting on, but then you can redirect it to what you're saying of taking off. Because when you've already practiced all the technique and you don't have to think about the muscle memory anymore, that's when you direct your mind to the memory that you have, or the moment that you have.
Yeah.
And it's conveyed well so that the message is all the more clear to, whoever's listening. And there was there's a guy parading on YouTube, Stephen Manley. I'm getting the last name wrong, but he's all over the YouTube ads on piano lessons. And his thing is, piano teachers have gotten it all wrong, teaching technique.
Yeah.
Like when you need to start from the soul and the heart like this, and he's like throwing himself on the piano. And he said, like, join me for this online masterclass, whatever. And I actually went to one of those.
Oh, yeah?
And it was really interesting. It was like a pep talk. And he said, yeah, you got to really feel it. It's all about feeling it. And he's right. But, like someone who sits down and they don't know what they're doing, they can feel it. but the person listening is going to be like,
what are you doing?
What are you doing, man?
What's going on?
What are you doing? And I think that's when passion comes in and the work, because there are people that work incredibly hard. I mean, you mentioned Hamlet.
Yeah.
Hamlet, or was it Beethoven?
Mozart. Yeah.
Mozart. I'm sorry. These guys worked. It was their life. It was just their life's work. So when they created this tragedy or this masterpiece, the amount of backing behind that, where they could just sit down and just get in the flow state, that's in a large part we just have to go through to make that happen. And for you, as someone studying theater and studying music, when someone sees you on stage, they don't see the 100 hours of rehearsal that went behind that. But at the same time, and we've been through this, when you get on stage and you've been through all the rehearsal, there's this amazing feeling where you can just relax into the character. And suddenly, when you get on stage, it's like this dance between the audience and you and your character.
Yeah.
And you feel the emotions of it all. And when you say those lines and the audience feels it, then you feel it in a new way. Yeah. Because you're no longer just feeling it yourself. You're feeling it through the perspective of them now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think even the same thing with music, when COVID was first going down and concerts were being canceled, and people are asking themselves, when are we going to, is live shows going to not be much of a thing anymore?
Right, yeah.
And I remember the point being brought up from performers that there's something about the magic of a performer being on stage and just, as you said, taking off those layers and being vulnerable, that there's this magic between the audience and the performer that you just can't replace it.
Yeah. And I think it was C.S. Lewis who said, to love at all is to be vulnerable, right? And I think that when you really truly love an art form, or you love, what you're doing, you are being vulnerable, because I mean, I could write a play, even a one-man show. Let's make it even more personal. Write a one-man show about, the life of Coda. I mean, that's life of Coda Owens. Got to get the full name. And you put it out there, and that's your life, that's your passion, that's your hard work. Yeah. And then people come, they hate it, they boo at it, they throw oranges at it. It's more than just, oh man, well that show didn't go well, now I'm in debt. It's like no, people didn't like what I sold myself for, what I really poured everything into. And so you're literally, as a performer, you're always putting yourself on blast, always open for a critique.
Everyone sees you, every angle, man.
Yep, yeah. And if anything goes wrong, I mean, you could have a performer put in hundreds of hours, but then let's say they mess up one chord in a big piece where they're the soloist. Yeah, everyone knows. And then nobody ever sees the great stuff they did. They only see that one little bad part, because that's how people fixate. And so, you got to just be really, really careful as a performer when you do put yourself out there like that. And it's a scary thing. Yeah. There's almost, I think, the number one fear in the world is stage fright.
Public speaking.
Yeah, public speaking. Yeah. And then number two is sharks or plane crashes. Yeah, dying.
Oh my word.
It's absolutely
so
insane
funny
how much people think about what other people think of them, And as a performer, you just got to get outside of that. You mentioned being a character. Ideally, when you get on stage, like you say, you don't have to work. You don't have to worry about the technique. You don't have to worry about how your voice is sounding or how you're saying a line. You're just thinking in the character. Yeah. You're not even there. In fact, I remember in shows that I've been in where I really have gotten into character and really just, felt that swing with the audience and felt that dance, like you say. Afterwards, after the show's done, it feels like a fever dream. I'm like, that wasn't me. That character is still living on somewhere else. I was never even a part of it. And it almost makes me want to go and talk with that character. Interesting. Which is weird because I played them, but they still have a legacy after me. Other people will play the parts that I played, and so it's very interesting. And it's like this kind of this detachment from reality. You're taking out yourself and putting it somewhere else, and it's a really fascinating thing, and it gets to the soul.
Well, I mean, here's probably the easiest example that maybe we could bring up. We were in a play together.
Yes, we were. Yeah. We should have started with
Shop
that.
around the corner, man.
Yeah.
We, for those listening, Coda and I, we were in Shop Around the Corner as a summer production on campus, and that was also when I proposed to Megan.
Yeah.
And people were saying I should propose on stage, and I was like, no.
You're like, couldn't live that one down.
We're better than that. Oh man. I mean, no offense to anyone who's ever done that, but
instantly gets canceled.
It was a great proposal. Everyone supported. But I mean, you talked about it being a fever dream. There's so many good memories of being on stage. And I think one of my favorite memories from that is in rehearsal, speeding through the lines on stage. And I think I still have a video on my phone where everyone's running across the stage, just ranting off the lines because it's a line through, but like really fast.
Yeah.
And this is just what I enjoyed about that play, just as a character. So I was Arpad, the delivery boy. And I loved being the comedic relief of the play, but I also felt like what got the audience, from my perspective or from the audience perspective, was like the whole play I'm oblivious to all this drama going on. I'm just having the time of my life.
Right.
I'm happy, you know, and then out of nowhere, my boss dies right in front of me.
Yeah.
And it's almost like people want to live through my character of life is easier, you're just happy.
Yeah.
And then out of nowhere, the tragedy hits you most of all. And there's nothing, or wait, oh no, he was going to kill himself.
Yeah,
and then
he almost did. I was waiting for you
I'm sorry.
I was like, you're the one
my
that stopped
memory's
it.
coming back to me. My
Good.
boss was going to kill himself, and I came in right before he could pull the trigger, and then we wrestled over the gun, and wow, this got dark.
Yeah.
But it's things like that you get to know the character as you go through, and you feel the emotions even deeper every time you work at it.
Yeah.
You know?
And even taking that to a deeper level, I think, because Shop Around the Corner was a great time, and it was really fun. And it really was, you know, it was that kind of comedic piece, even though it had its darker elements. And I think with, and this is, again, from Aristotle, I'm a puppet at this point, just saying what he said.
I love that.
But he would always say that, I say like I knew him, in his writings, he wrote that a comedic character we always look down on, you know, we're always like, oh, well, we're better than that character. You know, we're better than them. And so you're like looking at them and you're like, oh, that's cute. Oh, they're so silly. Oh, they're so funny, because you think about yourself as a little bit better, a little bit higher. Whereas you think of dramatic characters, you know, like Shakespeare's Hamlet or like, or I mean, like I was going to mention Larrabee in Sherlock Holmes. You know, you don't necessarily look down on that character as of, oh, I'm better, but you look up to them as almost like, not a celebrity per se, but like an icon. You're like, oh
larger than life.
Larger than life. Yeah. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. And you're looking up to them as like this big being, you know, who makes their own decisions, who their decisions can affect you as well as an audience member. Yeah. And so I think for me, you know, that part of Larrabee, it brought out a lot of really deep-rooted things in myself personally, and also in the character. And
you lost it in that play, man.
Yeah, it was great. It was great.
I still remember when I was just I had nothing to do with the play until I was brought in last minute to help backstage with food, actually. And I come in mid-performance, and you come running back to huddle up because you were almost having a panic attack. Yeah. Because you just come from a scene where you just absolutely lose your mind. Yeah. And I had no context, and
you were probably so confused.
You came in with a panic attack, like curled up in a ball, and people were just walking by you like they, like,
it was a normal thing, normal day on set.
Oh yeah, just give Coda a second, he'll be fine. And I'm like, what is this play?
Yeah, and you know that's really, I mean, sometimes that's perhaps not the healthiest way of going about it, sure, but I think that there is some validity in that type of acting where you allow yourself
to give yourself to it.
Yeah, you really just throw it all in, and you know that you left everything on the stage.
Absolutely.
And you know, I think at that point the audience is really, you know, you're not the main focus of their attention. No. You know, Larrabee was not the main character at all. No. And even Sherlock, I mean, that wasn't the main focus of the story. It's just these are pawns being used to emphasize the point of the story, you know.
I brought this up every episode.
Yeah.
Good art is all about contrast. And I think the beauty of amazing villains that make them especially evil is the more evil the villain is, the more crazy, the more whacked out it is, the more it enhances the goodness of the other guy or absolutely. The control. Like Larrabee and Sherlock Holmes. I said this to Megan all the time. I said, Larrabee was just unhinged. Yeah. You were mad and you weren't interested in controlling it. You knew that you would control over other people because you were unhinged, and you just gave yourself to it. The character did. Whereas Sherlock Holmes comes in complete composure. Yeah. And the contrast, you just feel the sense of relief. I mean, the play was chaos, but every time Sherlock walked on a stage, you felt like he's in control.
Yeah, like he's got it down.
He's got it down. He knows what he's doing. Like he's already thinking of 4 ways he can fix the situation. Yeah, yeah. And when he was contrasted with your character, it enhanced that control element where the more unhinged you were, the more I was like, oh man, Sherlock's gonna have fun with him.
Yeah, he's gonna beat him up. He's gonna get him.
And you know, the same goes with music too.
Mhm.
I think that with music, you have something unhinged. What I enjoy is when there's a song that's unhinged, but not enough that it's chaos.
Mhm.
But then there's like a thread of something really simple coming
Mhm.
through. There's a play, Broadway. It's not on Broadway yet, but I was introduced to it. Have you heard of Epic?
I have. Yeah, I've heard of it. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, and there's a song that's not even officially released, but there's a clip of it on YouTube
Mhm.
where Odysseus's son is alone with his mom,
Mhm.
and all the men of the kingdom are going after the mom, and Odysseus is
Right.
out, you know, and Odysseus's son is like, oh no, like all these guys want my mom, and this is happening, and I don't even know my dad, but they say my dad's a hero, and I'm
Mhm.
just falling apart. But I'm going to be a hero, and I'm going to go out and do this. And if
Yeah.
I'm going to protect my mom, if I have to be a god slayer to protect my mom, I'm going to be a god slayer. And
Right.
he's just excited about it.
Yeah.
And what hit me about that dynamic is this kid is threatened with all these things, but he's just becoming a man. And when he gets excited about the fact that just because there's all these bad guys and all these bad things going on, you know what? If I have to protect my mom, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to have a good attitude about it.
Yeah.
And it hits you because I think deep down, going full circle to what we started with, we all want that. We all wish that we could face our demons in the eye,
Yeah, absolutely.
and be like, oh, I'll take you down with a smile.
Mhm.
Like if I have to walk through all this tragedy and come out the better for it, yeah, bring it on.
Mhm.
Like we'll make a party out of it. We
Yeah.
all want that.
Absolutely.
And I think a beautiful song in a small way can show you it's possible.
Yeah.
Like there's someone out there that at least thought it was possible.
Mhm. And I think it is about that contrast, like you mentioned, because we don't ever see ourselves how other people see us.
Yeah.
Right. We're always looking at ourselves as a performer, and we always try to be self-aware. Right.
Yeah.
You're always like, okay, how do I look when I'm happy on stage, or how do I sound when I'm using this kind of technique or this kind of technique on
Yeah.
stage,
Yeah.
or this kind of bowing, whatever the case may be. But it's about that contrast of really you don't know. You have no idea how you're perceived. And the audience, they don't know how you're thinking either. And so when you feel so like mysterious towards it, I think that contrast of that they know and they know that you know, but you don't know. That's like a really
Interesting.
weird way to say it.
Yeah.
But it really is like a dance, like you mentioned with the audience, where it's just kind of unwritten law between two souls. And you're just kind of sharing this experience. And going back to what you mentioned about Larrabee with the contrast, I think that what also heightens that contrast is a villain. However, the crazier they are, the more passionate they have to believe that they're the right ones. So Larrabee, and this was even something I did. This is even something I did off stage,
like
just as a
that.
fun little
Yeah.
exercise. But people in the show, there are multiple times where I choke the lead Irene, or Meg Mays did a fantastic job. And Larrabee's very abusive towards her. And if anybody ever got mad at me, because I had a lot of people that were like ready to rush the stage, they were upset. And they would come to the receiving line, and they'd kind of be like a little like passive aggressive, like, "Hey, that was really rude what you did." And I was like, "Well, tough." But I'm like, "Sorry."
She signed
Read
up
the
for
script,
it,
yeah.
everyone.
Well, and she's a great actor. She did.
Yeah.
And so
Absolutely.
they're
Absolutely.
actually, this is a little tangent, but she was such a good actor that when we practiced it, it was really just me like holding my hand here, and then she did the rest. Like I was like an inch away from her throat.
She was able to
And-
sell the fact that she was being
And the
choked.
first time I did it, she was so violent towards it, I thought I was actually hurting her. And so I like jumped back. I was like, "Meg, are you okay?" And she was like, "Coda, I'm acting. Come on, get it together." And I was like,
Oh my
right.
word.
Angry.
That's so funny.
But yeah, anytime anybody was like,
I love that.
"Hey, you can't do that to her," I'd be like, "Okay, well, she was in my way. Okay, so it's not my fault that she was in my way. So I'm going to do what I need to do to get her out of my way." And that was just Larrabee's thought process, And so, Larrabee may have been very unhinged, but let me tell you, you won't find anyone more passionate about hating Sherlock Holmes than him, because he believed in himself. And I think
Interesting.
as a performer, taking that kind of to its logical conclusion, as a performer, you have to know what you're doing is the right thing. You have to be so passionate about it. You have to be so ready that if you fail, you're going to fail in the biggest way possible, and it's still going to make a show. And you just have to be ready
That's
to accept
so true,
those.
though.
You have to be willing to accept those faults,
Oh, my word. Man. I love that idea.
Mhm.
If you have to sell yourself to it so much that if you're going to fail, you're going to fail in the biggest way possible and still make a show of it.
Yeah.
I think when people, I mean, whether it's art or entertainment, you know, we're just talking about the idea of beauty.
Yeah.
Is someone that's just so committed that they're not really as concerned about the outcome. And that's part of the people that persevere at something and those that kind of give up. Is that I think some of the people that give up are, you're more concerned about perception. You're more concerned. You're more concerned about, oh, like, what if I have to this? Like, oh, like, what are people going to think? But one of the elements of passion, I think, is a vision where no matter how bad I mess up, my best is still yet to come. Yeah. And if it takes me failing in a massive way, that's just going to be another stepping stone to something even better.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I think even as a performer, and I'm sure you can attest this as well, the way that you learn the most is when you mess things up.
It's true.
Like the amount of times that I've had like a really nice block monologue and forgotten everything in front of people. Let me tell you, I never missed that monologue again because I knew that I could not mess it up again. Otherwise, it was just going to look really, really bad. Yeah. You know? Yeah, absolutely. To
tie a few things together, going to vocal
performance.
Yeah, sure. Because I took vocal lessons for a few years, and a huge thing I'm sure you can attest to is however you sound in your head's not how you sound to the public.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and just the idea of the ringing in the front of your head, etc.
The sinuses.
And the cavities, and that's the importance of recording yourself and listening to it. Yeah. Because you want to bridge the disconnect between how you sound in your head and how you think you're sounding and how you're actually sounding. Right. You want to be so familiar with how you sound in a recording that when you do a certain technique, you know the sounds that's coming out of you. Right. And part of that is something I've done a handful of times is, you record yourself singing a phrase and then you listen to it and you think, that's not how I sounded in my head. And then you do it again, you record, and then you say, wow, that is especially not how I sounded in my head. And you just go through it until you attempt technique and suddenly, oh, wow, that is how I wanted it to sound, you know? But every time you're like, oh, that's not how I wanted it to sound, that was a failure. Right. But I think a growth mindset doesn't label it as a failure.
Yeah, well, that's what rehearsals are for. You know, rehearsals are meant to mess things up.
Oh, yeah.
It's like better mess up in a rehearsal than in a performance. You know?
Yeah, the director stops you and says, actually, no, I want you to express it like this. Yeah. And, you know, a good actor isn't going to fight them. It's not going to, like, question them. I mean, you could discuss it if you want to know it better. Right. But, yeah, the whole point is, like you said, you go into it saying, hey, tell me what to do.
In fact, I feel like oftentimes it's the good actor that wants those comments. Like when a director skims over them and giving comments, it's like, hey, like, tell me how I did here, or hey, tell me how I did there. And it's kind of that idea of like, if they're not saying anything, it means they like it. And it's like, okay, but I need more than that. Like I need you to tell me how to be better.
What's a play that you were in where they just gave you the most creative liberty and the least direction?
Oh man.
Because how many plays have you been in?
In the past 4.5 years, almost 5 years now, 22, 23, something like that. Yeah, it's been quite a bit. I have to take a second to count. That's not including directing scenes. I mean, that's just like full-length actual productions. Yeah. That's not including, you know, all the acting I've done on the side or anything like that.
What's the most creative liberty you've been given?
There was a show within the community called Santa Rosa Community Theater. They were really, really great. Let me take that step back because I'm going to eat those words.
Oh, my word.
They used to be really good, or they used to do some good work. You know?
They did good.
It was kind of hit or miss here and there, depending on who directed, because it was a community theater. So depending on who they could get to come in, who they had directing, what story they were going to do.
It's volunteer, right?
Yeah. It's all volunteer. It's very small, and it was just something to do over Christmas. You know, because for me, my life doesn't feel complete unless I'm doing some kind of show. Probably not the healthiest outlet, but I just enjoy working on things like that, understanding things about character, introspection, that kind of thing. Yeah. Theater is a great way for me to do that, and it's my passion, you know? Yeah. But the show was called Beau Geste. Really funny story about this girl named Sarah who falls in love with this guy. Her parents are super duper Jewish, and he's not Jewish at all. And so they're like, hey, dump him. And she's like, okay, I'll dump him. Doesn't actually dump him. I had air quotes there for those listening. But so then her parents she's still dating this guy, right?
Yeah.
And her parents are all about like, hey, you need to find this guy who's Jewish, whatever, this old Jewish rabbi we're going to set you up with. She's like, absolutely not. So then she makes up this guy in her head named David Steinberg, tells her parents that she's dating this guy, David Steinberg. He's a doctor. He's Jewish as they come. And all this time she's still dating this other guy, Chris, who's not Jewish at all. And so her parents now want to meet this David Steinberg. So instead of fessing up to them like a normal person would do, she hires an actor to play David Steinberg.
Were you that actor?
I was that actor.
Oh, my word.
And his name was Bob Schroeder. The funny thing is, and she doesn't find this out until literally the moments before they're going to dinner. She thinks his last name's Schroeder. That's Jewish, right? He's not Jewish. He's Polish. And he has not a lick of Jew in him. So he has no idea what he's there for. And she's like, what do you mean? She's like, we're about to have this Passover meal. You have to know all these things. And he has no idea. So the most Jewish that he's done is he did some acting in Fiddler on the Roof, and that was it. And he was a background character. So he had no clue. But it was a really, really funny show.
I'm assuming it was a comedic play.
Oh, very funny. Yeah. Very, very funny. And what's even funnier is she ends up falling in love with him, dumping the original guy. And then she's back at square one because he's not Jewish. So it ends really, really funnily. 2 proposals, a heart attack. It's a great, great story.
Oh, my word.
Directed by Mario CRC when we did it in Santa Rosa Community Theater. And it was a really, really fun time. And I think he gave the most creative liberty that I've had as a comedic actor. Huh. Because you could tell he knew where he wanted to go with the story, but he also trusted his actors enough to know the story, so he was like, I have Coda has my perception of Bob Schroeder, my character. Yeah. So does Mario. Mario has his perception of my character. And so our job is to combine those 2 perceptions, because at the end of the day, the director's job is not to teach acting. The director's job is to produce, right? Put on the whole production.
Fair. Yeah.
And so he's trusting that every actor is going to learn their own lines, know their own blocking as he provides it. They're going to understand their character enough to perform it and to ad-lib if necessary, right? And so he gave us a lot of creative liberty. I think the only person that would rival that was Liz Thomason. That was in Sherlock Holmes, because she kind of she was very, very free with how we did our characters. In fact, one of the things that I still hang on to, that was one of my favorite things I developed about the character, was he had a glove only on one of his hands. And it was only on his right hand that he had a glove, black leather glove, never took it off the entire show. Sometimes when he was outside, he'd put on the other glove, but he always had one glove on his right hand. And when he would get nervous, his hand would shake like a law. It would shake like this. And it was a little thing that only a few people noticed, but anybody who did notice, they would ask me about it. And it was one of those things that, hey, I developed this about my character because I felt like it was mysterious. And in my brain, it was because he used to be an old boxer, and he had gotten burned on his hand one time while
made
fighting
a whole
someone.
Backstory for that.
Oh, have to, yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, have to make a whole backstory. And it was literally just that one little detail. He had that glove. And so, that doesn't change a whole lot about my character necessarily. But then when you think of it more logistically, if you had a burned hand that you always had to keep covered, how is that going to react when you go to shake someone's hand? How are you going to react when you have to pull a trigger? How are you going to react when you hit your hand against something? It changes a lot about how you move, about how you think. And it's an insecurity. And a character who didn't want anything with insecurity and who wanted to be unhinged, it gave somewhere that he was ashamed of. He didn't want people to see that hand. He would hide it as much as possible.
It affects nuances of the character that make it just that hair more different than other people on stage.
Yeah, more believable as well, yeah.
Exactly.
Because the idea with acting, I think the idea with performing in general, is it's an escape, right? It's an escape for the audience. But for the character, like I said, that character has a legacy before and after. Larrabee, even before he comes on stage, he was somewhere before the show started. He got food even though we never saw it on stage. He's living on now, doing whatever he's doing in prison. He has this whole legacy, this whole timeline. And the idea with believable acting is it's something called a Keyhole method. It's something I picked up from a book called, funnily enough, Notes to an Actor. Great book.
Who's that book by?
Oh, Alan someone. I don't quite remember.
Okay.
I'll have to fact check you on that.
You're good.
But really, really great book. And he said that the idea with acting is to have this keyhole method, where let's say that you and I are in a scene and we're having a disagreement, some kind of argument over whatever.
Cool.
The idea would be that if somebody were to walk by, hear something going on, and look in the keyhole, they would just think it's 2 people having an argument, having a disagreement. They wouldn't think, oh, look, it's 2 people acting like they're having an argument.
Oh.
It's like you want it to be so believable that if somebody's just glancing, they think that there's actually something going on.
Okay.
And that's the whole idea. Obviously, it doesn't always play out like that, but you want it to be that believable where people are they're not thinking, oh, wow, Coda's doing a really good job up on stage, or wow, CJ's doing a really good job performing that piece.
Yeah.
You don't want them to be thinking about you. You want them to be thinking about the piece.
Yeah.
Now, for me, my piece is my character, right? Your piece is your music, or my piece is my music, depending on what we're doing.
Yeah.
You want people to see your piece, to see the work that you're doing, not the work you're putting into it. You know, that's why I said what I said about I hope they don't see the rehearsals.
Yeah.
They don't even think about, wow, they must have spent a long time on this. They're just they're there to escape reality for the hour and 20 minutes you're putting on the show, or the 2 hours you're putting on the show, or the 5 minutes you're showing them a piece of music.
Yeah.
You know, that's what you're there for. And if you can help them escape that reality and see what you're seeing in your piece, in your music, in your character, that's the beauty of art right there. That's the tragedy that you're showing them that they're falling in love with, you know, and then they'll be inspired to do it. And then, you know, the world becomes a better place and everyone goes away happy.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. Now, I want to take this back to the beginning.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of really cool connections we could make here. So we started off with me asking you, you know, controversial thought, and you made the comment that, you know, music is more about the art form and achieving the beauty of it, right? And like not just entertainment, right? So we're talking about beauty. And you had gone into, you get on stage and it's not as much putting on, it's taking off.
Yeah.
And I think if you're a character, the idea of Larrabee is, at that point, it's so believable that for people to figure out things about you, they're taking things off.
Yeah.
From like, it's like, wait a second, it's not just an addition, there's something deeper behind it. There's a mysteriousness that says that that's who we're actually seeing. And who we're actually seeing has nothing more to put on. Now it's just layers to the person that you can just take off.
Right.
And so the authenticity, right. And so when I go and I think about music, we're talking about one of the best things you can do is be vulnerable. And if you're going to go big, and if you're going to mess up in a big way.
Oh yeah.
And that's like being really, really vulnerable. It's taking the stuff off, and it makes it believable.
Yeah.
And I guess where my mind was going was like, let's say you write a song that maybe isn't a personal story that you've gone through.
Sure.
But like if you're wanting to sell it, you're wanting to sell it in a way that if someone wanted more details, the details are there because it affected it. You know, like I think of YouTuber girl. She's Irish. I forget her name, but she wrote some songs and the stories were just so believable. And I felt like, man, I want to ask her more about the story because there's got to be more to the story. There's got to be more to this character. And so there's a beauty that invites. Maybe we can take this a whole new direction.
Yeah.
Not beauty as much as wisdom. Because wisdom was inviting. It's saying, hey, I am wisdom from Ecclesiastes, or Proverbs, if you want it, come on in. Like I'm calling everybody. And if you come in, there's a lot more to find. So when you have a story, it has an amazing moral.
Yeah.
I feel like if I sell myself to the story, if I let myself just give in, I feel like I'm just going to find more and more of the moral that's being conveyed. Yeah. You know, as opposed to, you mentioned entertainment, you know, art versus entertainment. I feel like entertainment can only take you so far.
Right. It's cheap, you know?
Yeah. You can only reflect so much. Now, I think part of it, and I think there's a place for some of this music, is it's a bop so you don't have to reflect. Right. Because sometimes we reflect and we get depressed. Yeah. You know, sometimes I need a bop. Yeah. But in terms of, I don't know, go back to Proverbs, you know, it's not the house that's happy that teaches you, it's the funeral. Yeah. It's the funeral that gets you thinking about what life is really about. And it says that that's the better place to go. Or there was a TV show that had ended. It was a tragedy. I'm not going to go into it. I didn't watch it. I won't watch it because of the content. But the ending's a tragedy. And one of the points that people made was that it's the tragedies that are more memorable. Because if you watch a great show and it's a happy ending, you left with, oh, that was really nice.
Yeah, good for them.
Well, what's the next show? But when there's a show where like the guy you were cheering for dies, you're sitting there for days thinking, man, but what if he kept going? Right. Like I wanted him to live. And that's when you think deeper about the story. You're like, man, but why did he die? Yeah. But why did he sacrifice that? And let me take this I'm all over the map.
Oh no, you're good.
But you know, the idea of sacrifice, like, oh, why did they die? Why did they do that? It gets you thinking. I think that's what's impressive about the people that sacrifice for their craft, because they're not just sacrificing for a bop. there's something more to it.
Yeah.
It's the people who, especially, it's almost their identity. Like, I can't not create this. Or for you even, you said, like, almost to be happy, I need to be in a play, which, I mean, we all have our Klondike bars, right?
Right. That's great. That's such a great way to look at it.
But in a similar way, I think that's what makes it that much easier to sell yourself to it and say, I'm going to leave it all on stage, because it's like, I know I'm going to do another show after this. Like, whatever happens with this, it doesn't matter, because I'm going to do I'm just going to take the next step right after it. But when people have their one foot in, one foot out, they're like, oh, depending on what happens with this foot, it's going to affect what I do with my other foot. But the people who are truly vulnerable, who want to sell themselves to the moral, the beauty of what they want to convey, it was never a question to begin with of what's going to happen. It's just like, I love what I'm about to do, and I want you to fully see what's going to happen, so you can appreciate the effort, the hard work, the journey. Even, I mean, you could attest, every show you're in, you pick up just a little bit extra skill.
Oh, yeah.
And then the next character that you do has just that much more nuance to it, because you don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for me, all of that to say, I think that's the hope of what I want to grow in, where I can sit down at the piano and not even think about the nuances of what I'm going to do. It's just like, man, I want to convey an emotion, and my hands are just going to make it happen.
Yeah.
And I want the lyrics to happen. And you may filter through hundreds and hundreds of lyrics, but it's the faith that no matter what I put down, the emotion's going to get down.
Oh, yeah.
You just stick with it long enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think to that end as well, because I know kind of what you said there kind of reminds me of what you just said a second ago, where it was like, for me, I'm in a show, and then, even though I'm in that show, I'm like, hey, I got the next one, whatever happens here, I still got the next one, so it's all good. I don't have that 1 foot in, 1 foot out. But I think really, for me anyway, it feels less like, oh, I've got that next show, and more of like, right now, this show is everything. It's like, I'm not even thinking whether I'm casting another show in another 3 months or not. Like, I'm like, everything that I'm thinking about, everything that I'm doing, sometimes even in my own personal thought life, like when I'm just home alone in bed, ready to fall asleep, this is what I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
It's all about this character, all about how they move. I mean, you're literally in your mind, you're creating another being.
Yeah.
And when you take it to music, it's like, if you're so focused on like, okay, I want to sit down, I just want to convey this emotion, like, instead of thinking, okay, I'm going to do a C minor chord and then I'm going to transition to, nothing like that. You just got to start thinking about these things that have hurt you, that have made you sad, and then the music will come, But, having that technique to build upon first. And that, in acting, we would call that the Stanislavski method. Really, really great teacher named Stanislavski wrote a book called The Methods, or The Method of Acting, or something like that.
Yeah.
Super duper great. Basically saying that you have to know everything about your character. So for instance, with Larrabee, it was, okay, I have to know how he walks. I have to know where he comes from, what his family was like, what are his interests, what's his favorite fairy tale? What did he read when he was at home? Is he educated? How much is he educated? All these things that we don't even think about ourselves, but we have these in our lives. It's like, okay, well, does he have any brothers? Where is he from? What food does he like to eat? Things that don't even show in the story, but you have to know them about your character, because that gives you more to draw upon. So then let's say I'm walking through a crowded scene and I see an orange. Okay, well, maybe in my mind, Larrabee's allergic to oranges. Okay, I'm not going to pick that up. Or maybe he really likes oranges. Okay, I'll pick one up, start peeling it. Something that the audience will never pick up, but it gives that nuance, it gives that creativity, and it gives you more to draw upon. Same thing with the music, right? It's like, you have to have that technique to draw upon. You have to know what chords can transition well into other chords. You have to know, whether you want an augmented or a diminished, whether you want, a seventh or a ninth.
Forwards and backwards, it comes more naturally.
Yeah, exactly. But then at the same time, once you have that down, then you can focus on the other thing that Stanislavski would say is the emotional recall, right? Remembering those times when you were hurt and how that felt, and putting that into your music. One thing that one of my voice teachers told me that really, I think it stuck with me more than anything this semester about music, was I was singing a song. It's a German song called Unvergänglichkeit. It's a mouthword. Okay. It's a mouthful. Unvergänglichkeit. It's Opus 27, number 1, and it's by Korngold, which is really, really great composer, modern composer. And the song means imperishable. And it's basically saying, I'm laying my hands to rest because my memory of you will live on after my death. Super duper sad, super duper solemn.
Yeah.
And I'm working on this piece. It's really, really beautiful. It's got a lot of high notes in it. It's lovely. And my instructor, he was like, why do you think you should get louder at that point? You know, it was an ascending melody. So I was like, well, because it's going up. I was like, so it goes louder. And he was like, do you think the music came before the words or the words came before the music? And I was like,
That's
and typically in older pieces, I'm not sure if this was the way with Korngold, but typically in older pieces, you think of like Quilter or Schubert, you know, who pulled from poems or already established pieces. You know, you think of like Der Erlkönig from Schubert. He was pulling something from Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, right? The Earl King. This mystical story about a creature that steals children, essentially is what it is. And you think about that story like, wow, that's really, really, that's frightening. Yeah. And then you listen to the music. Very, very violent, very scary. Yeah. You know, but then you have this contrasting this very like mystical, almost eerie sense with this going on in the background. And so you think, okay, the first time Schubert heard this poem, this is how he saw it, you know? And then you start to realize that, you know, Korngold, the first time he heard these words about, you know, laying your hands down to rest, you can stop working because it's okay. Your memory will live on. This is how he felt that piece. You know, you think about the way that Quilter writes with his Shakespeare, because he takes a lot of Shakespeare and turns it into music. And it's like when he first heard these words, it evoked such an emotion from him. He could not speak it. He had to make music around it, you know? And so it's what came first, the music or the words? I think every time the words make the music, right? And sure, you can put words to music, but I think that true artistic feeling, it's the soul behind it. Yeah, absolutely it is.
Man.
Yeah.
There's a thought that's been going through my mind. I mean, there's almost so much I could comment on that part of me is like, just like move on and just cap it off.
If we could be here for 2 hours, it'd be great.
Oh my word. I'd love that. We've been talking about, you know, beauty and art and acting and what it means to, you know, incorporate a character and everything you are and just leave yourself on stage and you just give yourself to the moment. What's been going through my mind is the closer I have felt to God at times, or the closer you are to God, there's an ability through God to be at the moment. Yeah. Because through the cross, your entire past completely taken care of. Like, I don't need to think about the past. Yeah. Because it's gone and God's organized it to however it's going to be used in my life.
It's very comforting.
You can reflect on it. Yeah. And the future. I mean, it's a biblical principle of take no care for the things of tomorrow, for the tomorrow will take care of the things of itself. Right. Yeah. And when I am walking in accordance to God, there's this ability to just be present. And also, the more you get to know Christ, I kept thinking of this when you were talking about the more you get to know a character, the more things come out naturally. Yeah. Or the more you practice XYZ, then it's more about the emotion. I feel like the more you get to know God, the more you don't have to question what God's will is in specific moments. Right. But it auto-corrects your emotions when things happen. Like, me close to God reacts differently than
me far away from God.
Exactly. And that could even be applied on stage. You know, when you're acting out a character, go back to Larrabee. Like, you are unhinged and what was it that you said about Larrabee?
How he had to believe that he was in the right.
Yeah. He was so confident that he was in the right. And so he's reacting through that context. When we are in the context of Christ, we react completely differently to everything, even our own emotions and our own experiences. So, you know, you talked about the beauty of art and music and it not just being entertainment. I think part of what acting even and music and art, what's meant to be is I keep using the phrase sell myself, but you just give in completely to your piece of art. Yeah. And when you're close to God, you're showing people that you're reacting to a topic a way someone normally wouldn't. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Or an amazing thing I actually heard from Mark Burrell's podcast, the Creative Community. He said they were talking about the movie Soul Surfer, and the family rejected so many movie scripts from studios because none of them captured what actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
And what actually happened is they didn't grieve as much.
Yeah.
Like all these movies wanted to capture,
Right.
just the grief, the
Yeah,
grief, the
because
grief.
that's what sells. That's what's entertaining.
That's what sells.
Yeah.
Like, that's what's even relatable.
Mm-hmm.
But what actually happened was they bonded as a family and trusted God and said, he's going to get us through this.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes it for even more compelling story because then
Yeah.
it asks the question,
Why?
how?
Yeah. Why? How?
Why? How? And so I guess what I'm saying with all of this is when you and me commit to a closer walk with God,
Mm-hmm.
we approach our art where we can give it all to the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And God he's taking care of the past, he'll take care of the future. But
Right.
if it's his will that you are doing what you're doing right now, then you almost have free reign to just hone in on it, do nothing but that.
Yeah.
I mean, also moderation.
Right. Yeah.
But again, that's where the Holy Spirit comes in.
Exactly.
Because then there's something about the Holy Spirit that says, I want this person to have more passion through me than someone else,
Mm-hmm.
but also they're going to be a good husband and father.
Right.
And I think that's what's nightmarishly hard about so many industries
Mm-hmm.
is what we said. You give yourself to it. You're going from thing to thing to thing. There's something enviable about that I think is also biblical to a
Mm-hmm.
degree, but we're commanded to be a great husband first. You're commanded to serve God first.
Yeah.
And I think that's just something that you and me, we're always going to be growing in
Mm-hmm.
of how do I give myself to God so when it's his will that I do X, Y, Z, he almost gives me for me,
Yeah.
and then it's not just an obsession, it's a
Right.
relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I would pray that, I can continue to embrace and you as
Yeah,
well. Because I
absolutely.
mean, there's people that God really gives genuine talent to, and there's a right way to use it. And I think, as we said, when you just don't give up and you just persevere,
Mm-hmm.
that there's just so much beauty for the world to behold and even yourself. Because
Mm-hmm.
you wake up one day and you realize that God was molding you all along.
Yeah.
Not just molding you for his glory, just even you as a person, but
Mm-hmm.
you look at your craft in a whole different way
Right.
where you can just, as you said, release yourself to the character and
Mm-hmm.
it just comes alive.
Yeah. The one thing
Yeah.
about that is there's something else that I got from my voice teacher is that he has a father who was very, very like hands-on with like woodworking and stuff like that. And that was just who he was. He was always fixing things and things like that. And when he got older, he had a lot of arthritis problems. And so it was like he wasn't anyone anymore because that's all he had.
That was his
craft.
identity.
Exactly. And so as a performer, you have to be so certain that your identity is not found in yourself. You are not what your talents are. And that's something that's hard for me to grasp. You are not what your talents are worth. You're worth more than that because your identity is found in God. It has to be found in God. If it's not, if it's found in things that can perish, well, then it's going to perish.
Yeah.
That's the second law of thermodynamics in action right there. And in that same line of thinking, if you're saying, okay, well, I'm gonna not dedicate as much to my craft thing because I don't want it to become an idol. That's a big thing that people say is like, oh, theater's an idol because you're putting so much into it, or school is an idol because you're spending a lot of time in school. So okay, well, it's where God wants me. So there's that. But I think the other big thing is that let's say that you put on a performance or you write a song,
Yeah.
right? And it's kind of it's not the greatest,
Yeah.
and you licensed yourself as a Christian artist. Well, now people are going to see that and go, oh, that wasn't really that good. He's a Christian. Makes sense. And then you're reflecting poorly on your creator. So I think as a Christian, it's almost more important to throw yourself more into the craft that God has put you in. If God has called you to be a performer, you perform your heart out on stage. If God has called you to be a musician, you write the best music you can, you perform the best music possible. If God has called you to, I mean, it's like pastors always say, God's not calling everybody to be a preacher, right?
Yeah.
Just because you're a preacher doesn't make you a better Christian than anyone else. It's about how close you are to God. If God has called you to be a teacher, you teach as best as you can. Because even though, and I know that it's said a lot in the performance communities, we're not trying to be the best, right? Nobody's trying to be the best. You can't be the best. Don't be the best. But in my line of thinking, if you're not trying to be the best, you're not doing your best.
Oof.
And I
Oh.
think, right, hits hard.
Oh.
I think that if you're not trying to actively be the
Yeah.
best person out there,
Yeah.
then you're not pushing yourself as hard as you could be. And obviously, you know your moderation, you know your limits. Obviously, I'm not going to try to go up against somebody who's, a 4-time Grammy winner or some kind of actor who's got millions and millions of dollars, who's done numerous roles. I'm not going to go up against, Daniel Day-Lewis or anything like that. But for where I'm at, I'm going to try to be the best performer at my college. I'm going to try to be the best singer in my department. I'm going to try to be the best actor that I can be on stage with the cast. Not to outshine anyone, not to outdo anyone, but to ultimately draw a focus back to the one who put me here, to God. When you look at a building, you don't think, wow, that building's doing a good job standing there. You think, oh, wow, that architect did a good job designing it. But if the building looks like trash, if the building isn't kept up, well, then it looks bad on the architect. It doesn't look bad necessarily in the building. So I think that's something that we should really continue thinking as we're performers. It's not about who we're performing for, what we're performing necessarily, although that sometimes can be important, but it's about who we're reflecting. Who are we showing put us here? And I think that's really the crux of what art as a Christian should mean. You're a Christian before you're an artist. You're a Christian before you're a performer. You got to keep that in mind.
Coda, I don't know if I could have ended this better myself. That was convicting, man.
yeah, it's a tough one out there.
Oh,
it's one
man.
that a lot of people, I think that is a very controversial thought, about trying to be the best by doing your best.
My older brother, he had this exact same conversation with me.
Yeah.
And he was talking about how when Christians stand before God, there's going to be more Christians. I mean, we're under the bloods.
Right.
Gray waters, okay. But I mean, they're not great, but you get what I'm saying.
I understand. Yeah, I got you.
More Christians are going to fail by not going all in than the ones that went all in and got sideswept.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your chances are better off to jump in head over heels and just, take the passion God's given you and just go all out and trust that God will keep you from being wherever you go. He's going to sustain you.
Yeah.
But yeah, Coda, this was awesome, man.
Yeah, this was great. Man.
Oh,
I'm happy to do
dude,
it. It was a good time.
Man.
Good time. We gotta do this more often.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, guys. And I'll see you next time. I'm going to end these better.
Oh, totally fine. Good with
See ya.
me.